All right. Hey, Songtown, I'm Marty Dodson. I'm here with Clay Mills. Clay has got a topic today that's going to be very controversial and might break the internet. So, Clay, what is it? Hit us with it.
Your personal songs are not commercial.
Whoa.
I don't know if I believe that. We're going to dig into that. Marty, I got an email from a Songtown member. We'll call him David. Protect the names of the innocent here. He goes, I pitched a demo version of a song to a couple of publishers. They both seem to think it's too personal to be commercial. Is that a common thing these days? I always thought that songs that were authentic were more commercial, and even if they're personal, it made a better commercial song. So I thought we'd dive into that. I'll read you, at the end, I'll read you my response to him because I think it was a good response. But let's just talk about that idea of what makes a song too personal, in your opinion?
I think being too specific. You know, like if I'm writing a song for my wife, I can talk about the place we met and what she was wearing and what we said that night and all these specifics, and she will melt when I play it. She's like, oh, I can't believe you remember all that. But everybody else is going to go, that's a little too, and, I don't relate to that. That's not my experience.
Right.
And so I think a lot of times we can write things so specifically that other people can't really relate to them.
Yeah, you're more focused on the details because that's really what happened than you are focused on the emotion and the feeling.
Yeah.
Richard Leigh told me one time, first time I ever met him, Richard's a Hall of Fame songwriter. Brilliant, wrote this classic, Don't It Make Your Brown Eyes Blue?
Yeah.
And he goes to me, never let the truth get in the way of a good song.
Yeah.
And it took me a while to figure out what he meant by that. But if we go into a writing session and we're like, this is the way it happened. I did this, and then she said that, and then the waiter turned around and said, that might have been what happened. That might be the truth. But the song is going to want to go in its own direction. You have to learn to listen to the song and figure out what's the best thing for this song. So often I use the real life situation as a launching point to get that song started. For instance, when I wrote Don't Think I Don't Think About It with Darius Rucker, I brought in the idea because I had just broken up with a girlfriend and I was second guessing myself. And he's like, oh yeah, I relate to that. He goes, I still think about somebody back in high school, and wonder how they're doing. So we could have gone my direction of we broke up last night, or we could have gone his direction. The song was going to be a better song going in the direction of thinking about someone from your past that wasn't just broken up with last night. So that's what I mean. I went in with a clear idea. The song still is just as personal to me, but now, because we talked about it, everyone that hears the song in the audience can feel that same thing, and because we did what was best for the song.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I wrote a song one time that started off, it was about my grandparents, and it started, Ed worked at the factory most of his life. Minnie was happy just being his wife. And
now, that could be good if that was just like one of the few details in the whole song.
Right.
Like Johnny worked at the docks. There's been so many classic songs, but they weren't just littered. I'm thinking your song was just littered with...
My whole song was about my grandparents and the details of their life and where they lived. And I thought it was a brilliant idea, but I played it for my publisher. He's like, no, nobody's going to want to sing that. They don't know your grandparents. Sorry, this was their story.
It's like the saddest song he ever heard, but...
Yeah, exactly.
Richard Leigh, I'm thinking about Richard today for some reason, but he said that him and Harlan Howard, another legendary songwriter, they used to meet for lunch every day. I think it was meet for lunch and drinks every day. Mm-hmm. And he said we would have sad-offs. We would each try to bring in a song we wrote that day and see who was the saddest. And so, you made me think of that story.
My favorite Richard Leigh quote is, writing is thirsty work. We were at a writing retreat, and he came through with a glass of wine. He said, Marty, writing's thirsty work. So you can file that one away. I think you have to remember that your song and your story in your song has to connect to the listener's story. So, and that's where I failed with my story about my grandparents, is that it didn't go far enough to connect to anyone else's story. It was simply my story.
Yeah.
And so I think when you're writing, you have to remember that, just like, hey, I've got to connect to the listener's story. And that's where the quote about don't let the truth get in the way of a good song is sometimes the truth and the actual, all the details get in the way of the listener being able to connect to it.
Right, instead of the audience being able to put their own truth into the song. I think that's what we're going for, is we want all that emotion from our truth, but also let the audience feel theirs. I think another thing, too, that a lot of writers who overwrite details are forgetting that the music adds a ton of emotion as well, and so they're trying to force all the emotion into the lyric and all the details in the lyric, but you also have the music side of it that's going to make people feel a certain thing. And if your music is making them feel one way and your lyric is just hammering details over the top, then it's too much. Somebody told me one time, I think it was Tommy Lee James, he said that, imagine a scale, a balancing scale, and he goes, have you ever noticed that really complex music has simple lyrics? Really, if it's a beautiful melody, it's going to have simple lyrics. And then he goes, rap songs or Bob Dylan that had all these lyrics, the melodies became simple. So it's like this balancing act. And he was like, you can't have a complicated melody and a complicated lyric. It's just too much. Yeah. And I really believe that.
So Clay.
Yes.
I don't want to forget to ask you, what was your response to the person's original email?
Yes, I like it. I brought it here with me today.
I'm glad
you
read
it. Okay, so David was concerned that, he didn't understand that these songs that he was writing, why are they too personal to be commercial? So I said, David, you have a lot of heart in your writing, and commercial doesn't have to mean that it's not personal. I have some deeply personal songs that became hits. The key is learning a few techniques to take something personal to you and lift it to a level where it also becomes personal for the listener. They become just as invested in the emotion of the song as you are, and they'll relate it to events in their life. I think sometimes when publishers say things like, it's too personal, it's not commercial, they're not songwriters like you and I, so they can't sit here and explain exactly what they mean, but what they're saying is that they're just not thinking an audience is going to dig it,
Yeah.
And so I think that's our job, is we want to feel what we're writing, but we want the audience to feel the same thing.
Yeah.
If you get too personal, they're not feeling it. They might be cringing sometimes because, I didn't too much information.
Exactly. Yeah, my first publisher had a really helpful fix for me. When I would turn in a song that was too personal, he would tell me to go home and dig deep and find the universal emotion or idea behind that song. And then to brainstorm titles around that idea that might be more accessible to more people. So I took that song about my grandparents, I went home, and I realized that the big universal idea behind that song was, sometimes when we lose someone, it feels like we died.
Yeah.
And so I took an idea into him called While You Loved Me. And it was like, I was born the day you kissed me, I died inside the night you left me, but I lived while you loved me.
So you ended on the positive.
Yeah.
I lived while you loved me.
Yeah, so we made it a lot more positive. It was about losing somebody, but we didn't have to kill them off. In my original song, the person died. And so it was much more accessible in that the listener could plug in, maybe this song is to them about someone that died. Right. Or maybe it's somebody that broke their heart. Right. Or maybe it's a friend that they lost, that moved away. So there's all kinds of scenarios that the listener could plug into that, and it still worked. It was not so specific that the listener was like, okay, cool story about your grandparents.
Yeah. Awesome.
So when that happens to me, if I write a song and I feel like it's too personal, I look for that universal idea, and then I try to find some ideas around it that are more positive or that are more accessible to more people.
All right. We'll see you next time. Right on.
Take care.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you appreciate the content, hit the subscribe button and help us grow. Shout out to Sweetwater Music. It's where Marty and I get all our musical gear. Great people. We'll see you guys around town. Right on.